So today is going to be a lot of live demo and, oh, Timothy, there is lecture today. It'll be an interesting one though. So today's a lot of live demos. I want to go through, the projector on. I want to go through a run of Docker and deploy an app live. And I'll be honest, I was a lot more confident in this about an hour ago that everything was going to go smooth. And then right before lecture, I'm like, let me just do a dry run and make sure everything's going to work the way I want it to. And I hit an NPM error, and I was swearing at NPM and Node for the past hour. So I think I have it just as Matt was talking. I think I got this solved. But if it's not solved, that's still not the worst thing because you're just going to see a more realistic development approach. A lot of courses, we have this, everything's shiny and perfect by the time we get them up on a slide and in a lecture. So even if things go wrong, you're just going to see that, hey, when I develop, I go through the same swearing that you go through, cursing at your laptop and all that good stuff. So I might have it squashed, but we'll see. We'll see what happens here. So with that, before we get into the demo, we'll delay that a little bit, and I'll say, are there any open homework questions, any homework 5 questions that I can help with before we get into? Yeah.
For objective 4, it can be just a regular interval poll. It doesn't have to be long poll.
Correct. Yeah, objective 4 does not have to be long polling. I didn't even show how to do long polling in lecture. I don't expect you to do that. Long polling gets tricky. But polling, hit that set interval at some regular interval, and that's it. If you have the rest of it, if you have objective 3 done, objective 4 should be pretty much free. Hit it in your body onload, set interval, make your Ajax calls.
Really is simple. It seems like you just set up a path and start.
Objective 3 is about the rendering and you deciding where you're going to render the content. It's not too difficult. Like I said, and I would imagine most of you are agreeing with me on this, that this is a good step down in difficulty from homework 4. So if you're looking for where's the trick, where's the trap in this one, you're not really going to find it. It's not. Everything's pretty straightforward. Everything's text parsing. You don't have to work in the world of bytes. So it is a bit more straightforward than homework 4 was. For objective 3 on your server, it's just like it was on homework 3. I always have this problem with weekly homeworks. I have to have 5 homeworks in my head at any given time. Right? No, 4 homeworks in my head at any given time. We're grading 4. You're doing 3. Or no, you're doing 5. I'm preparing 6. How's that only 3? I swear it adds up to 4. Maybe it's because of the extended deadline that it got jammed up. But anyway, I have to have a lot of homeworks in my head, so bear with me as I think this through. On homework 3, when you had to save information to a text file and then serve that text file, objectives 2 and 3 are just like that from the server perspective. The only difference is on the client side, we're doing those with Ajax calls instead of with query strings and forms. I think that's objective 1 on homework 4. And then each homework has 4 objectives, so I get them mixed up in my mind if I'm ever questioning myself like that. I know homework 5 objectives real good right now because that's what's in everybody's mind right now. I forget which ones are in the past. The ones where you got information, saved it to a file, and then served all the contents of that file. That's what objectives 2 and 3 are like. The difference with homework 3 is that you get to design your architecture a little more. Where do you render things? What encoding do you use for the bodies of the Ajax post request and the response of the GET request? You get some design choices in there. Is a big difference. Any other homework 5 questions? Yes.
Small question. So with polling, if your messaging accepts empty inputs, and then it will constantly print those empty inputs, right? Would that be okay?
If it accepts empty inputs and then just adds that to the list of messages, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, from a UX experience, not really, but for this course, for building features, that's fine.
Okay.
By the way, I mentioned this one time, but since we're, since we're talking about other courses, you remind me of that with the UX question. HCI, if you haven't taken that with Alan Hunt, definitely take it. What's the course number on that? What's the course number? 370. So take CC 370 if you're interested in the front end of all of this really. HCI, Human Computer Interactions, taught by Alan Hunt. It's a great course. So I am excited. Like I said earlier, we're finally have these web courses being offered. 312 is focusing on the back end and how do we build functionality and interact with the server. In HCI, Alan provides the back end. He gives you the server and says, don't worry about the server. How do you make your site usable? How do you make it, how do you smooth out that user experience and make things just work nice from a user perspective without worrying about HTTP and all the functionality on the server side. And then Matt's class, which will go into the more enterprise. If you're a large corporation building huge apps, how do you do that? How do you scale up? And then modern networking concepts. The other course that he was mentioning is a kind of a prereq, which will go into the details of how do TCP, UDP work, how does IP work, how do routers on the internet update their routing tables to be able to get efficient yet fairly reliable routing throughout the internet. So we have a good set of courses that we're starting to build up that if you take all those, you'll have a pretty good grasp on what's going on in the world of the internet and web apps and everything, which seems like the internet's here to stay. It's going to be a kind of a big deal. So you might want to take some more courses, especially HCI, because, well, especially all of them. I don't want to single that one out. But I say HCI is kind of the other half of this course. This is a back-end course, that's a front-end course. Take them both, and you got a really good, solid foundation for building web apps. Because if you're taking this course and saying, man, I wish we would care more about what our sites look like, HCI is the course for you. All right, any other questions about homework or anything else? Oops. Yes.
I think you touched on this, so sorry if you repeat yourself, but for the project, if our team decides we're not going to do too much this week, we're pretty busy, do we still have to submit the Google form for our meeting? Can we, or can we just all be oh, that's not this week?
So meeting each week is a requirement. So you do still have to fill out the form at the very least. And that's the same exact requirement. That fucking NPM. I might let out some swear words this lecture. But so still fill out the form. I mean, it is a requirement that you meet. That's technically a recitation according to the being a 4-credit class. That's your 4th credit. So I had conversations with with other admin and people in the bureaucracy where that has to be there. Because I believe they removed the recitations off of the schedule now. And during that process, they're like, you can't do that and still be a 4-credit class. That's very important, especially to the bureaucracy, to have that 4th credit. So if I start saying, oh yeah, you can skip your meetings, even if I wanted to say that, you know what, you're scheduling and everything, whatever. But actually, let me back up a second. You weren't talking about during spring break, were you?
Yeah.
Next week, okay. Because during spring break, you don't have to meet during spring break. I didn't make that explicit yet, but you don't have to meet during spring break.
Yeah, we still met almost, but we were just oh, okay, we didn't really do too much this week, but we're all fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're in a, touch base on a Slack chat or at least something, and then submit the forms and get that requirement. Yeah, because I understand you have, next week is midterms week. It's, if you're going to have a midterm in a class, that's where it goes, is week 7, right before spring break. So you're just naturally going to have a lot of them there. But still, at least touch base, have a meeting, at least on paper, can I say that? In the recording. Don't listen to that. Edit out that part of the video. But at least have the meeting. The same will apply when I review those form submissions. The same things are going to apply. I'm not going to be they were busy, so whatever. I'll still consider it the same way. That said, if all your other meetings are great and you're making great progress in every other meeting, but that one you're just well, we're all busy, that's a different story than if things are shoddy throughout the semester and there's one that you're busy, I'll make regular human decisions when I'm looking at it. Any other questions about project, homework, course, curriculum, anything? Can you tell I'm stalling a little bit? I'm nervous about this one. All right, let's dive into it. Let's do this. So let's look at this stuff and see how we're going to use Docker. So I have this app. Like I said last time, the app itself isn't too important. It's only like half functional even. It's like a half-baked example. I just needed a small-ish example to be able to demonstrate some things. So I grabbed this code, and now I regret doing it in Node because NPM is jacking me up. So like we mentioned before, this is a package.json file. This is where I'm putting all my dependencies for this project. And I need all these dependencies to be installed at some point, which is my headache, so that'll be a topic of conversation throughout this. I'll at the very least mention what the problem was and what I kind of did to fix that issue. But what we really want to talk about today is this Docker file. So we looked at this file in the slides last time. I want to talk more about what this actually is, what it's doing. So just a quick review. I'm going to start with an Ubuntu 18.04 image. This is built and maintained by Docker, and I can put this line, when I run this Docker file with Docker, it's going to read that line, download that Ubuntu image. It doesn't install it, so it's not going to take all that long. It goes by pretty quick. But it is going to download a pre-built image that contains Ubuntu 18.04. I'm going to update my repository so I have the latest stuff that I can download. Change my working directory to root. Install everything I need to run Node, which is Node and NPM. I'm going to copy all of my files in this directory, in the home directory of my project, into the container. I'm going to install all my dependencies, running npm install, which is going to look at this package.json. It's going to look for a file exactly named package.json, look for all the dependencies in there, and download all those dependencies, and put them in this node modules directory that we saw last time with a ridiculous number of dependencies. As I showed before, I don't have many dependencies here, but those dependencies have dependencies, and those dependencies have dependencies. So we end up with a lot of packages that have to be downloaded. And that's, again, that's where my headaches came from in my testing right before lecture. All it takes is one of those packages to be busted, and everything's destroyed at that point. If one of those dependencies, anything goes wrong with the downloading, if the repositories aren't all up to date, there's just too much that can go wrong, and something went wrong. Anyway, npm install to install those dependencies. I'm going to expose port 8000. So from outside of this container, I'm able to access port 8000 inside the container. We have to explicitly say this because containers, the whole point is that they're running in isolation. We don't want to, by default, have them exposed to the outside world. So we're going to have to explicitly say, I want this port to be available from outside, so we can really control and specify the minimal amount of interaction that the container can have with the outside world. And this container can't, I won't say that. But so we can access something from inside. And then finally, CMD, this one command. This is the important that we use CMD. This is going to be the command that runs my app. This won't be executed when we build the Docker image, but it will run when we run a container built from that image. And that'll make, that didn't make sense. It'll make more sense when we go through this demo. So this is my so Node and then the ecom app, which is the entry point of my app. So if I run this script file, that's what starts my app. So for example, if I go into my terminal right here and I do node ecomapp.js, except I put nope, that's the very first thing I type in this demo is already not going great.
What is Node like, is that Docker sometimes, or you specify?
That's like saying Python, but for JavaScript on the server.
Our thing might be Python.
Yep, so that might be Python 3 server.py if you're running Python. If you're running, say, Java, you'll want to run your compiler, you'll want to run Java C, and then as a command, do Java in your app. So just so you know, you're compiling when you're building the image, everything except running your app itself. That's what you're doing with the run commands. But then CMD, that's where you're going to use when you finally get to running your thing. See if we can even run this. Why? You know what? I removed the database. That might be it. Yeah, so this runs on port 8000. I can go Chrome. Localhost 8000, I can see my app. So that's our normal way, like that's how we would normally run our apps. Just run node in that JavaScript file in the command line. So let's close that and run this with Docker this time. I want to go to my other terminal this time. Probably not that one. Not this one. This one. All right, so let's build a Docker container, or build a Docker image, which if I look at this Docker images, I can see all the images that I have created on this machine. We'll get the right size here. There we go. And I do have, did I delete it? I might have already deleted it for the example. Good, because I wanted to. So now is when we would run our Docker build -t to give it a name. I'm going to name it ecom. And then dot to say run this in the current working directory. That's going to run my Docker file, and we can see it run. Oh, that did have it already built. And we can see that it's going to run each one of those commands. And you notice that took almost no time at all. It's because I already had the image built. And Docker, like I mentioned last time, it works similar to Git, where it's going to look at all the history and look at all the changes and only run the commands that have changed since the previous run of Docker. So I have my container, which I gave it a new name, so I do get a new container based off of the old one, but it's kind of like creating a new branch off of that container. So now if I do Docker images, I meant to say images throughout that. Docker images, I'll have my ecom image that I just created. It's about 0.5 gigabyte for what it's worth. And I can start running containers based on this image. So if I look at if I do Docker PS, that's going to show me all my running containers, which I do have one, which I'm going to remove. Just so we have a clean slate to work with. So let me stop that image, or stop that container. I'm going to get those mixed up, ain't I? All day. So I'm going to stop that container so we have no containers running right now. And I want to start up a container based on this image. So the image doesn't really do much for us once it's built, but it can be used to create containers, which is where our app is going to run. So let me run that command if I can remember off the top of my head. Publish. I'm going to just pick a random port. Detach. My image name, ecom. So this is going to run my container. I'm going to use -- publish and then 2 ports separated by a colon. This means I want to expose, I want to map my local port 8500 to the container's port 8000. So this whole thing, this -- publish takes one command. So -- publish 8500:8000 is going to say my local 8500 should map to the container's 8000. So the requirement for the project is that all of your containers are going to run on port 8000. And then if we run your app, we can choose any local port to be able to use and then map that to 8000. We'll know 8000 will be exposed, and that's where your app's running. So we can run your container on a port, map your local port, whatever port we choose, to 8000 in your container, and know that your app will be exposed on that local port. Detach is going to run the container in the background, so we're not entering into the container when we run it. If we don't have that, well, first let me go to definitely actually UB. So I don't have that running on 8000 anymore. I shut that down in WebStorm. But if I go to 8500 and all goes well, we can see our app there. So we have our app, everything's up and running, and we have that running on whatever app whatever port we exposed. Now, one of the nice things with Docker, one of the big advantages here of having images and images creating containers is part of what Matt was talking about, is how do we scale up, how do we distribute our systems across many, many machines? Well, with Docker, I'm just going to run that same command again. I'm going to use port 8501 now. I'm going to take a look at my images. Not those all in one line, it just bugs me. But, well, we're not going to get there. And we can see the command that's being executed, how long it's been up, our uptime and all that, the image that this was ran from, and the ports that we're using. We're mapping localhost 8501 and localhost 8500 to 8000 in each of these separate containers. So each container is using its own port 8000, but since they're completely separate instances of Ubuntu, we're not worried about port already in use or any of that stuff, as long as we're not repeating the port here, our local port mapping. So for example, if I run this command again, it's going to say 8501 is already in use, port already allocated. We can't run that again in 8501. But now what we get is when we go to our browser, what you would expect, 8500, that's still running my app. In 8501, that's also running another version of my app. So these are two completely different instances of the exact same app running at the same time. So if we have an app and we have this a lot of different processes running our same app, running across multiple machines and running in multiple cores and all that, on separate threads, we can run all those apps, instances of our app, and then put a load balancer in front of that, just one architecture that we can use. We have one machine that takes all the HTTP requests and then sends them, routes those to different machines running identical instances of our app. And when we have an architecture like that, now if one machine isn't enough to be able to run our entire app, to be able to support all our users, we've got a large user base, we'll get requests on one machine and then start sending them to other machines, start, as the name implies, balancing the load across a whole server room full of machines that are all running our app in separate containers by having many instances of our app running at the same time. One thing I want to show, if we don't detach, we're going to, let me choose a different port too. If we don't detach that, We're actually going to run inside of the container, and we can see our app running, listening at port 8000. That was my print line that just says my server's running. So I can see that running there, except now, my terminal's locked up. I can't do anything with this window now, since it's not running in the background, but I can, I do have 3 instances of my app running now. But I can't do anything with this. I can't even control C it. I shouldn't have done this one. I wanted to show it off, but, possibly. I haven't tried it, so I don't want to give a definitive answer. But Docker PS, I want the one that's running 8502. Thought it was kill. Hey. Oh, come on. I guess I really can't get that window back. Well, you've been replaced, window. So if you don't run it in detached mode, you'll get, you're stuck inside that container from then on. If you want to enter a container, so say, we have these 2 apps running, we want to go see what's inside there. We want to start exploring. We do have a way to do that after it's running in detached mode. So let's, a little bit smaller. So let's, so what we can do is execute a program inside a container. Let's see if I can, I think it's -ti. The container ID, let's choose this one. And then the program you want to execute, I'm going to use bin bash so I can get into my command line inside that container. So now I'm inside of this container, and I can start navigating. I can take a look what's in here. It's all of my app files that I would expect, everything that was copied over. And I can, take a look around. It's, if you've played around with the Ubuntu command line, I mean, it's Ubuntu. That's what it is. We can take a look around, see our /root directory. We can confirm that that is the home directory that we set in our container. So we set this as our home directory, so that's where we end up when we log in. And we can just navigate around and do whatever we need to do in here, which I don't really want to do much. Wonder if we even have Pico. Probably just VI. No, we don't even have VI. We'd have to install a text editor, I guess. I'll do cat. But we can see that it is our files in here. Our files did make it into this container. So if you ever need to go into a container and see what's in there and see what's going on, especially if you have some file I/O, you want to check, are my files saving properly or something like that. You can always enter into the container and see what's going on in there, and then exit to get out of there. I want to show one thing. This is actually an error I had that I was pulling my hair out with. I had ecomapp.py instead of JS. So this is an error in my Docker file, which is going to break things. It's not going to work. So first I want to show, oh my goodness, why did it take me back here? Oh, because I opened a new window. So let me go into Docker again. Docker build -t ecom2 dot. Let's do that. So this is going to rebuild my container. It's going to see that there was a change. So you notice it hung up a little bit on the copy because it saw a file changed, and it's smart enough to say, okay, a file changed. Let's update that file and get that new file into the Docker container. Let's run this thing. Did I just skip over all of them? No, I didn't. I never started one from this one. Docker, and I don't think you have to put container on these, so I'm going to try without it. Detach ecom2. So when my CMD, when my command is executed, node ecomapp.py, that's an error. But guess what I got for error messages? Diddly squat. I got nothing there. And if I go into Docker, that container is not running. This can get frustrating to find if you're just cut and pasting the commands from the doc and running those to test it. You're going to, if you have any errors in there, you're going to run into this where it just doesn't do anything. If you get rid of this detach, though, and run it, and instead of running the container in the background where you can't see any of the standard out, get rid of that detach if you're having this problem, and you can actually see the errors that you get when you're trying to run the container. So get rid of that detach, and that container keyword is optional in there, but you can have it or not. But here we get to see, okay, cannot find module root ecomapp.py, and I go, oh, py, what am I doing here? That's crazy. Now we can go, okay, I have something to fix. That should be JS. Docker build -t ecom2 dot. Doesn't have much work to do. And I'll go back to my detach one. And now we have it running. So if you have any errors, get rid of that detach, and you can at least see your error messages and start your debugging process to see what's going on in that Docker file itself. If you have a typo in that Docker file, it'll catch any of those errors. Okay, so we have Docker set up. Cool. But that's not deployment, that's still just our development environment. And here's where things get a little spottier. So this ecom app, I do have it. Let me go here. Spell my own name wrong. Good one, Jess. So I have this on GitHub. So this is the procedure you'll do for your project. Push to GitHub, have your app hosted there, either in a public or private repo. I'm not picky for this class. And then you can get the clone link to be able to get this app on wherever you're going to host it, if you were to host it, I should say. There's no hosting, I said this before, but worth reminding, there's no hosting requirement for this course. You don't have to have your apps out there live. I highly recommend it, I encourage it, but I'm not going to require it. It always, whenever I require it, it causes a mess with all the students. Either you pay money for a hosting service or you try to make one of the free ones work for you. And I don't know, it's just always a mess, and it doesn't have enough to do with the learning process and the material that, I decided to cut that requirement. But I do highly encourage it, and that's what we're going to do here. Hopefully, let me find the right window. So here, I'm logged on to a remote server. This is a DigitalOcean server in New York City, as the name kind of implies here. So I'm logged into a machine via SSH and logged into the command line running bash on a machine in a server somewhere in a DigitalOcean server room in New York City. So let's deploy our app out here. So I have some of this set up just because I was having issues. I'll skip some steps here just to make sure it's going to work. So I already cloned the repo, but if we didn't, we would do git clone. And that link, that's going to download that repository, get all our files for our app inside this container. Container. It probably is a container, actually. Inside this server. So I already did that. We have all our files here, including our Docker file. I already have Docker installed. So then we would do docker build -t ecom2 because I already have ecom1 built. But Docker's going to see that I have ecom1 built and just copy that image anyway. And then to say run this in the current directory. And there were no changes, so nothing had to happen there. Docker run publish 86, very carefully chosen, 8600 detach ecom2. So that was very carefully ran. I'll go in, we have a week later in the semester where I just have all dashes on the week. I'll go into this in more detail when we get to that week. But for now, I like Pico, don't judge. So I have this configuration file on my Nginx server, which is the load balancer. I have a lot of apps running on the same server. So I have Nginx taking the requests, listening on ports 80 and 443, and then forwarding those requests to different ports, different local ports. So I have this sockettoon.net mapping to port 8600, which of course is the one that I chose to publish my app on. So that 8600 local is mapping to the 8000 inside the container. So now when I go to port 8600, I get my app, which we can verify with curl. I hope. Fingers crossed on this. If I do it the right way. Connection refused. Well, you get to see the debug process. Can't find, oh, right. That is a thing. That's a thing. So I had to comment out that MongoDB stuff. That was the same error that we saw locally. So hey, point proven that we get to see the same errors in the same environment. I'm going to push those changes. Let me not touch my package.json just in case that starts acting up again. So actually, let me talk about that issue. So I was having NPM issues every time I tried to install. I was having some issues. What I ended up doing is getting it to install locally, creating that node modules file on the server itself. And then when I do copy ... I'm copying in all the node modules in that copy instead of running npm inside the container. I want to say I have that fixed now, that shouldn't be a thing, and that's not how it should work ever. That's not how things should work. But that's how I got past that issue. That's why we're not seeing issues right now. But I'm going to pull the new changes. I get those lines commented out. I have to rerun Docker build. That's going to copy those new files in. Hangs up on copy a little bit to get those new files. Doesn't have to run all of this stuff again. Then run this again detached, because I'm going to be confident it's going to work. And we get our HTML when we put our localhost 8600. So, but we have ports 80 and 443 of sockettoom.net, and that's the stuff I'll explain more sometime in the future. I have that forwarding to port 80. So if I go to com, sockettoom.net, my app's live on the internet. We even have this lock, we're actually secure and all that stuff, which are all topics that I can talk about in that later. So we're live on the internet now. No changes from the structure that we've been doing in the class. And I could have easily done this with the servers that we're running, that we're building for the homework assignments. There's nothing restricted with those servers. We just happen to be running them on our laptops, and then you're testing them with your laptop and everything. But since those apps speak HTTP, they're ready to be deployed out there on the internet. You throw them on a server, run them on a server, and get ports 80 and 443 mapping to them. Not 443 because we haven't done security yet, but port 80 mapping to them, and you're live on the internet. It's a matter of paying a hosting service to be able to host your app, to run it on a server that's going to run it forever instead of just until you shut down your laptop. So we have our app running in a Docker container, exposing port 8000, mapping that to port 8600, and then we have Nginx sitting on ports 80 and 443, forwarding that traffic from sockettoom, that domain name, which I have mapped to my server's IP address, and then forwarding it to 8600 to be able to go in the Docker container. So we have quite a few things bouncing around, but in the end, we get our app running. And I'm not going to have time to do it, but I wanted to try to clear out the image. Probably better off that I don't have time to do this. I wanted to delete the images and then rebuild Docker from scratch and see if I got rid of that NPM issue. Probably better off that I didn't, in case I didn't get rid of that quite yet. But when you start playing around with Docker, I didn't show it today because it takes a while, but not a ridiculously long time. When you first create your Docker image, it'll run all the commands, and you can see downloading all of Ubuntu and all those commands running. It doesn't take horribly long. It's actually pretty lightweight, but it does take a little amount of time. So with that, I hope everyone has a good weekend, and see you Monday.